So I saw a really interesting post on r/Star Wars EU today. Interesting because, to be honest, I see where the user is coming from, but I completely disagree. They say Fallen Order is probably the only post-2014 Star Wars thing that feels like the old EU. And what they mean, of course, is Star Wars Legends, the expanded universe before the Disney takeover. Now, me personally, I didn't get the EU vibes from Fallen Order. I guess a lot of the post-Order 66 stories and Legends just felt a bit more bombastic to me, but I thought it was an interesting point for a video, and I want to talk about some of the canon stories which to me feel like they fit best within Star Wars Legends. Then at the end, because it's been so heavily requested lately, we're also going to quickly go into my suggested EU reading order. I'll leave that at the end because I know a lot of you are well read. All right. So I want to start off with actually two works. The first is Star Wars Squadrons, and the second is Alphabet Squad, or rather the Alphabet Squadron trilogy. And I will say, the three Freed novels in the Alphabet Squadron trilogy are probably more melodramatic than most of what we got in Star Wars Legends, but to me, it really captures the camaraderie and even intimacy which develops fighting in a fighter squadron. This may be sacrilegious, but by the end of the series, I cared as much about the characters in Alphabet Squadron as Corran Horn or Wedge Antilles or Tycho Celchu. Now, again, the writing is different. It's more melodramatic. In Alphabet Squadron, it's more a serious, dramatic character piece, whereas, to be honest, the Rogue Squadron series especially is more like Top Gun and Star Wars. But in both, the battles are really secondary to the interpersonal play between the fighter pilots, and it helps that both are also happening as the Galactic Civil War is transitioning to a new era. Surprisingly, I didn't like Alphabet Squadron the first time I read through it, and I think it was because I was expecting the space jockey silliness of the X-Wing series, but after reading the book a second time and reading the entire trilogy, it goes right into the S tier, and to me, feels a lot more like Legends than I expected. But for a bit more schlocky fun, we've got Star Wars Squadrons. It not only pulls directly from games like X-Wing versus TIE Fighter in terms of gameplay, and the squad dynamics are also a ton of fun. There's some cool varied missions. To me, that game fits perfectly within the Star Wars expanded universe, except for some of the plot details, of course. All right, so we're going to run through a few books relatively quickly. I gotta say, there are actually a lot of really good canon novels that people sleep on. Many, however, don't feel like the Star Wars expanded universe. Bloodlines, for example, does not feel like an expanded universe story, to me at least. And I do think that Star Wars novels typically within the new canon have been a bit more, I guess, focused, but also limited in scope, while also being more serious. Let's get the obvious out of the way. Timothy Zahn has basically continued his character of Thrawn from Star Wars Legends into new canon. The Thrawn backstory in the Ascendancy trilogy works well with either version of the character, and I really enjoy the other canon Thrawn trilogy he wrote as well. Those answers are obvious. To me, however, one sort of legend story archetype I really enjoyed was the smaller scale, more focused, out-of-the-way story. For example, the MedStar duology. It's all about medics during the Clone Wars. It's an excellent pair of Star Wars Legends books. There are some canon novels that hit a similar itch to me, and one is Lost Stars. I love this story. Yes, it's meant for young readers. Yes, it's got some ultra sappy romance, but the story between the characters is genuinely compelling, and I love the look we get at the Imperial Academy. So cool. We get something similar in the first book of the new canon Thrawn trilogy as well. I eat that up. But seriously, if you haven't read Lost Stars, read Lost Stars. I also like the Battlefront Inferno Squad book for that reason. A pretty focused story which sets up the background of characters we get to meet later, but with no real universe-shaking implications on its own. Sort of similar to that, we have Dark Disciple. I mean, this one's not surprising. It was based on Clone Wars scripts, and it feels exactly like one of those books which would have came out during the general Clone Wars blitz we got in the 2000s. Also, as another aside, Shadows of the Sith feels like a different sort of Legends novels, one of the one-off Bantam stories which features a villain of the week, usually a Dark Jedi or other Force user. I won't spoil it, but Shadows of the Sith, which takes place about 10 years before the sequel trilogy, is a lot like that and features Luke and a younger Ben Solo. All right, I want to talk about TV shows, and I feel like there's a lot here that actually pulls directly from Legends, not just in terms of plot, but also tone. More so than any, Skeleton Crew reminds me of some of my favorite Star Wars Legends stories, the adventures with these young characters which are ultimately inconsequential to the greater universe, but so much fun. Some of my favorite Star Wars Legends stories growing up were from the Young Jedi Knights series. Skeleton Crew feels like that mixed with some of the Lando Calrissian or Han Solo adventures. I love that show. Andor, on the other hand, feels like it's pulled directly out of an early Star Wars source book. It's gritty in a way that, until Andor, really, we only got indirectly, I feel, through RPG storytelling, maybe the occasional video game like Republic Commando, but even that is a little silly in comparison. But I also feel like the first half of the Book of Boba Fett Season 1 and Mando Season 1 really, to me, have a pretty special feeling. Like, the Book of Boba Fett definitely went off the rails quickly, but Mando Season 1 especially, as like a genre production, a Western set in the Star Wars universe, it feels perfect to me. Then, obviously, Mando Season 2 and especially Ahsoka, they tie in really closely with the expanded universe. Like, Ahsoka is essentially a soft reboot of the Thrawn trilogy tied in with Star Wars Rebels, which to me also has a pretty good EU feel, largely because of the similarities to the Clone Wars, which some people wouldn't call the EU, but I think for fans of the expanded universe, there's a lot within canon to experience, which you might enjoy. Alphabet Squadron, Lost Stars, the various video games, there's a lot to check out. Also, I posted this question to the Discord as I was writing this video. I got a few responses. Rebel Appliance said, Ahsoka feels very EU core. I totally agree. Aegis Rand said, I love Fallen Order, but I'm not well read enough on EU to judge that question. Fair enough. And JP correctly pointed out that Shadows of the Sith not only feels like the expanded universe, but also canonized the errant venture, the Star Destroyer of Booster Tarek, which is very cool. Anyway, you can join the patron Discord by, well, checking out the Patreon. But I do want to address the other question, which again, I've been asked a lot recently. How should you tackle getting into Star Wars Legends? And I always recommend one thing. Read the Thrawn trilogy. If you don't enjoy the Thrawn trilogy, I don't think you're going to like reading Star Wars books. The Thrawn trilogy, to me, is the closest anything has come to feeling like the original trilogy. I mean anything. Other movies, video games, the Thrawn trilogy stands above them all. If you like the Thrawn trilogy, like I suspect you will, my next recommendation is to read books from different eras. I love the post-Endor era. To me, that is the expanded universe, so after the Thrawn trilogy, I'd check out maybe the X-Wing series. If you're down with that, go back to the True Sepulchre, read through it all chronologically. You are in for an amazing time. And don't rush things either. People often ask me, what do I need to read to get to, say, the Yuuzhan Vong War? Don't do it like that. Don't treat it as an endpoint you need to get to. You'll only get to read these books for the first time once in your life. I wish I could go back and rediscover the expanded universe, all the silliness, all the fun and serious moments, seeing the lore come together, what they knew before the prequels, what they didn't. It's a blast. Otherwise, check out other eras. You've got the Revenge of the Sith novelization or Plagueis. Those are two of the best Star Wars Legends novels, period, and they're set in the prequel era. You can check out the Bane trilogy. I don't love it, but a lot of people do. Just pick a point and start reading. It's really not that complicated. These books were meant for people to jump into. Anyway, guys, that's all I've got. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.